Angel Cejudo, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so good to have you, man. An Arizona legend, and now you're working with the great Eric Larkin, who you call the golden boy of Arizona at Valiant Prep. I think it's just the coolest thing I've ever heard of. It's a school only for wrestlers. Is that right?
Yeah, that's how we first started off, and we're hoping to grow, create other sports and other activities.
Yeah, and so it's a college prep school, and you're the head wrestling coach, and two of your guys just made the world team. One of my favorite up and comers, Kyler Larkin. Give us your thoughts on that tournament, man. How the guys did.
I thought we wrestled really, really well. We were at a tournament 2 weeks prior, and we didn't do so good, but that was the beauty that we made the adjustments by the time we got there. I think overall we wrestled good as a team. We cleaned up a couple of holes that we needed to do. And I thought Kyler wrestled phenomenal. And I thought Christian Castillo wrestled good. I also call him Chicken Hawk. That's his nickname. Kid's amazing. And the whole team. Derek Guanajuato wrestled very well. So overall, I think they wrestled good.
So your height, so like when you look at the team, the Valiant Prep team, it's a private school, and you guys don't compete in like the Arizona states because of the fact that you're in a prep school, so to speak. So do you have a schedule that goes kind of year round, and are you guys training for all these events together?
Yeah, so most of it would come either before or after the season. And we're going to change things up this following year. But for the most part, we train throughout the year. It's a year-round program, but most of our competition will either come before or after. So this year we'll change it up because from November to about February, we have no competition. And I think in order to be successful, you have to be able to compete. So, I don't believe in having higher matches, but if we can get at least 15 to maybe max 20, I think we'll do okay. So for the following year, I think we're gonna, finish our season through Fargo and also through the World Championships in Rome. I'm gonna give them a little break, a week and a half, and then get back to our folk style. Because the only tournament we ever get to wrestle, which is folk style, is Super 32s. So we don't get to wrestle very many folk style matches. And it's like having a college wrestler not wrestle throughout the year and go to the NCAAs. So for us, Super 32s is the NCAAs. And I want to make adjustments because we could wrestle. We're known as a freestyle team. We're just as good at folk style. It's just we don't get a chance to prove it. So I think this year I talked to Larkin and the staff about giving them a small break. Usually I give them a month and a half before we get going, but we need at least two competitions before we go, and I think we should do better this coming year. Last year, we lost 10 one-point matches, and it really came down to strategy and not having enough competition.
Yeah. So you're trying to build in a couple tournaments before Super 32 that are folk style?
Yes. We're looking to do 2 tournaments before we go. Nice. I think if we have at least 2 tournaments, we should put a couple on the podium.
We need to get you guys up here for a folk style duel with Izzy style.
Man, we would love that.
That would be amazing.
Izzy has been doing a lot of great things in the last couple of years, and he's at the top, and we love competition.
You guys could shoot up, hit up Askren Academy after that, and then shoot over to Pinnacle and have a little folk style duel season.
Wow. Hey, that sounds like a good idea.
Let's do it, baby. Let's do it. I'll sponsor the thing, man. And I love those guys. I don't know Askren as well, but the Pinnacle guys, unbelievable. Izzy Styles, I'm in Chicago right now, and he's a legend, and he's just the ultimate innovator. So, man, there's a lot of good wrestling up here. That'd be a lot of fun.
Oh, it sure would.
Wow.
Yeah, I think those are, to me, the top programs. Pinnacle, I would put it at the top with Askren and Sibo.
Bro, let's not forget about Sibo. I was going to say we could easily hit Sibo. That's like a perfect square of wrestling, and just bring the Arizona boys up here for a little folk style grind out dual season. I love it.
Oh, that would be awesome. I wish we could do it this year. This is where we have some of our toughest guys. We're going to miss out. We have Mito, guys like Gary graduating, Caleb Larkin and Daniel. They're all top 5 kids in the country.
But they're going to be back one more year, right?
What's that?
They're going to be back for one more year, right?
No, they're gone.
They're done already. I thought Kyler was a junior. Oh, wow. Man, that is those are some hammers, but dude, that would be fun to do. So in the winter, do you guys do things like shoot over to like Eastern Europe for a couple of junior freestyle tournaments, or what do you guys do? Just train and stay in the room?
We train, stay in the room. We've done a couple of college tournaments. We went to one in Iowa, and we did one at the beginning of the year in Oregon. But I think we're going to try to find for our higher level guys, my juniors and seniors, if there's tournaments that we can go to that are maybe junior college NAIA level, because I do believe I got to keep my kids at their level, and to put them into a Division I tournament would be a little hard. Now, I do have 2 kids now that can compete with the D1 guys, which is Emilio and Caleb Larkin. But outside of them, I got to keep them around their level of wrestling. And we have a few kids coming up, and I think more junior college NAIA tournaments would be great.
Well, especially because the California JUCOs wrestle in the fall, so that could be perfect for the Super 32 buildup.
Yes, it will. I think we're looking at 2 tournaments. I think there's one in Indiana that we did last year. That was great. And I think there's a journeyman tournament. I think it's going to fit our schedule. And I think with those 2, we should go to Super 32s. They're well prepared to see where we need help on it and what we can clean up before we go to the big show.
Nice. Yeah, those journeymen, it's awesome. They're doing so many great events. And so you're coaching now, on the cusp and just bringing up all these great guys. Let's go back to Maryville High School, early 2000s. How do you get introduced to Frank Sinus?
Okay, so, and maybe I'll go back even a little further back, because when I met Frank, I was in 7th grade. So I started wrestling at this school called Pueblo del Sol Middle School, and I did their first season, the 2.5 months, and I fell in love with it. It fit right into the kind of kid I was, which was, tough, love, growing up with, 6 siblings. What is one thing you do without getting in trouble, which is you wrestle, right? You can't just punch your brother. I mean, it happened a lot, but most of it was just wrestling around. And I have one brother 1 year above me, and I have the Olympic champ right below me. So we had no choice but to be tough, right? And wrestling, it's a natural thing since the BCs, right? What's a natural thing? The oldest sport is wrestling. And to prove your manhood, how tough you are, you have to wrestle. So when I started at Pueblo, my first year wrestling, I did very well. I didn't know much. I just know I didn't lose. And I did whatever it took. I throw the kids off, and I was mature for my age. My following year in 7th grade, I started wrestling. I started the season again. Then there was Coach Frank, and I also had another coach named Richard. They had a program at Maryville High School, which was Maryville Wrestling Club. And they saw me wrestle, and they invited me to Maryville High School, which was about 3 to 4 miles away from where I lived. And when I met him, Frank, he brought us in, and it took us to a whole nother level of wrestling. And I think more than anything was the commitment that he had for kids in the neighborhood. So Frank was the coach that did not let you fail, did not want you to work hard. His whole thing was like, you got to work hard. That was his mindset. And my other coach was Fingers. He was a technical coach. So it kind of worked good, both hand in hand. That's when I first was really introduced to wrestling. And then right out of the gate, I was tough. And in Arizona, the wrestling's not as Pennsylvania and Ohio. So for me, just starting off, I didn't lose very much until Frank introduced us to going to national tournaments, regional tournaments. And that's where our wrestling just got a little better and better.
And when you were just getting into wrestling, what was your reality life back on the home front?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just like what was your reality like outside of the wrestling room on the home front growing up?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I grew up in West Phoenix, and like I said, we were single mother, and there's 6 of us. And one thing that I grew up in apartments my whole life, and I love it. It was like a good childhood, I thought. We got to, as long as we stayed within the parameters of the apartments, so long as we couldn't leave, we were free to move around. When it got dark, we had to come home. And it was, like I say, I had a lot of friends growing up. We always played basketball, you know, depending on the season, right? If it was basketball season, we would play basketball. And if it was baseball, we played baseball or football. So I was really active as a kid. We didn't have very much, so we didn't have I would say that it was Nintendo or Super Nintendos, and if we ever did, we'd fight over the controller, and we didn't have it very long because they'd break or my mom would throw it away. So we didn't have very much. All we had was each other. So, you know, when wrestling came, I just fell in love with it. It was, you know, I don't want to say my childhood was rough because you don't know any different. You know, when you go back and think about it, you're like, wow, I wouldn't want my kids to go through that. But I thought I had a great childhood. I mean, it taught you a bunch of valuable lessons. But when wrestling came into my life, I just fell in love. It's just like you fall in love with a girl for the first time. All you could think about it day and night. I could not get enough of it. That would always be a practice. And I had a coach that made sure I got there. When I did get to that point where I was like kind of a little burnt out, he didn't let me quit.
Wow. I've heard you say that your older brother was super influential in your life along with those coaches. And, you know, a lot of people in the wrestling world think Angel and Henry, you know, I didn't even know you had an older brother until I started the research for this. So what kind of impact did he have on you growing up?
Well, he was just kind of the way we grew up. I mean, it was, how can I explain it? Is like, so when you grow up, you know, mothers working 2 jobs, right? So you kind of got to police yourself. And we also grew up Pentecostal. So we had the fear of the Lord like no other, right? So on top of your mom, you had the fear of your mother. You also had the fear of God. So we always policed each other. So I'll give you an example with Henry, you know, and I even have a little bit of I don't say regret, I don't know what the word is, where we didn't have a brother relationship. So what I mean by that is I had to police him. My mother was working. If he got in trouble, I got in trouble. If I allowed him to mess around and steal or be a bully and it got back to my mom, I was getting it. And that's kind of how we grew up, right? That was like, so I almost grew up as a father to Henry, almost like a stepfather. Like, it was bad. I have a lot of regret for it, but maybe it made him who he is now. And same thing up, down the ladder. My brother policed my sister policed my brother brother policed me, and we just kept going down, which there is a lot of, you know, things we have to talk about and, you know, as a family, but for the most part, my older brother was really the foundation. When my mom wasn't around, he was the one that started working, dropped out of high school at a young age. So now he had to take on the responsibility as a father, which I kind of look at it as really not fair to him either, but that's just the way life was, right? And, you know, one of his first, you know, when he went to work, I think he started with construction and dishes. I can't really remember, but his first check, he went and bought me and my brothers and sisters sheets, clothes, make sure he took care of us. And I think he took on that role for a very, very long time. And like, so he took on that role as my mom was working. He took on that role as a father figure. And the same thing with my sister Gloria. When he was out to work and we were at home, she was in charge. So it's kind of that was the way we kind of grew up. I don't recommend it for anybody else, but it made us who we were.
Super close family then.
Yes.
So how did the situation arise where you became Henry's legal guardian living in Colorado?
Well, yeah. So I was, when I was at Maryville High School, you know, I wrestled, I became a 4-timer, and And then I had committed
undefeated four-timer.
Yeah, that was a lot of work. But I had committed to ASU, but I knew I didn't have the grades and I didn't have the education to go to school, to go into Division I. I just know that even to this day, I struggle with a lot. I mean, the way you can judge me is by the knowledge and everything I have with wrestling. But when it came to schoolwork, I just struggled my whole life with reading, with writing, with math, right? We moved so much as little kids that we never really had a stable home. So we always moved from school to school to school. I don't know how you can do it because I moved once and it cost me so much money. But with my mom, it was like when you couldn't pay the rent, you got the eviction notice on the wall, it was time to move. So we never had an education. So I knew once we got to went to high school, I committed to ASU. I was ranked number 1 in the country at one point, didn't have the grades. So even, I think they have it now, or maybe they had it then. They would always bring out one high school athlete to the Olympic Training Center. Somehow they knew somebody and they got me in there to the training center after I graduated high school. So Henry's 2 years younger than me, 2 grades younger than me. He's only a year and a half. I'm only a year and a half older. So in 2004 was the first time the women's were introduced. They introduced the wrestling to the Olympic Games, women's wrestling to the Olympic Games. Sarah McMahon and Patricia Miranda, they showed up to Arizona. Maybe they had a couple of weeks off. I don't know how they ended up in Arizona, and we ended up in the same room.
Is this when Sergey was the coach for the women?
No, Sergey was the resident coach for the men's, but I think Steiner was the coach for the women's. But they showed up to Arizona. I think Sarah McMahon, was going out with Steve Blackford. So they were able to go, they came down. So they ended up in the same wrestling room as we were. And I wrestled with Sarah. Henry wrestled with Patricia. Well, Henry's a little kid, freshman, and he was really small. So he wrestled Patricia, and she loved him. Like, I need him for the Olympic Games. So they worked out a deal in the summertime. So Henry trained at the training center that summer with Patricia for the Olympic Games. So I think Henry made a splash while he was there because he was wrestling freestyle, the Greco, and the women's. So what happened was they found out who he was and who's this little kid running around? They're like, oh, this is Henry. His older brother will be attending the Olympic Training Center next year. So what happened was they were like, well, he needs to come with her. So that's kind of how it happened with this. So I was already going. And when they saw him, they're like, this is the kind of kid we're looking for, these type of kids. So as I was going, in order for him to go, I became his legal guardian. And that wasn't even the battle. The battle was convincing my mother to let him go as a junior in high school.
Wow.
So how do you tell your mom, hey, I want to chase my dreams, but I have to go to Colorado? And I know I love wrestling, but I don't love it that much that I would let my sophomore, my junior, a kid in high school, like my son, to leave. It's just, I couldn't do it. And it was a lot of convincing. And I think it all worked out for the best, man. God always has a plan. And I think it worked out.
Wow. I mean, that's a huge step for someone that young. I mean, you're young enough to move away, and then him coming as a junior. So once you guys ultimately got up there, where were you living at? What was like your daily routine?
When we first got there, we were in the dorms. That's where we were in, well, more of the barracks. The training center used to be, I think, an old Air Force base. So we were in the barracks, or in the dorms, I guess you would call them, for that first year. And it was, I'm a homebody. And I mean, I could stay in the dorms and stay in my room. This was before cell phones or Instagram, social media. I'm just a homebody. So it wasn't too hard for me. But one thing that it was, now we grew up like sleeping on the floor, on the same bed with 4 or 5 other kids in there. Now to see Henry, like he got a room down the hall, that was a little different. Now I'm like, oh, wow, this is different for me. So that took a little adjustment. It didn't take very long, but that was something different.
You slept on the floor?
Well, growing up, you don't have very much, you know. Everyone had a blanket. You grabbed one, he grabbed one. And that's the way we did it, man.
Make it happen. And then what about the wrestling? So, like, are you and Henry, like, is he even going to the high school practice, or is he only working out at the OTC from that point on?
So we had, you know, 2 practices a day, or 2 on Monday, you know, 2 on Tuesday, so on. So he would go to school in the morning, and sometimes, you know, and when we first got there, Sergey was the wrestling coach. He was there for 1 year. So yeah, Sergey was the coach. And I think what happened was that summer when Henry trained with Patricia, he told me this story, and maybe I'll have him retell it to you, but the reason why they liked him was when Henry was wrestling, he didn't have a partner. So this older gentleman goes, "I'll wrestle with you." And this older gentleman just beat the brakes off of him. You know, he's older, and Henry's trying to take him down, and this coach is laughing as he's beating him up. And Henry was upset, and he didn't want to talk to anybody. And they asked him, they're like, "What are you upset about?" He goes, "I was this coach here, he beat me up. Not beat me up, but he just beat me in wrestling." And he was almost coming into tears. And they're like, "Do you know who just wrestled?" He goes, "No, you're wrestling with Sergey Belibazin, one of the biggest wrestlers ever." So that's when Sergey was like, "We need him here."
Wow.
And that's kind of how it started.
I freaking love Sergey Belgazov. Both him and Anatoly have been on this podcast, and I mean, it's funny because I would go out to the Arizona State camp when Tom Ortiz was the coach during that time. And one of the years, like Jason Welch would come and stay in his parents' camper. And one of the years, the women's team was there and Sergey was the coach. And that's when I first learned about him, and it just went down the rabbit hole, watched the John Smith match, of course, on YouTube, and then, you know, became obsessed with Sergey. And so he started working with you guys. What was some of like the philosophy and things you picked up when working with Sergey?
Wow. Everything that I do now as a coach could trace back to what Sergey's techniques are. A lot of it is what we picked up from him. I would always ask him questions. See, I knew I always wanted to coach. Since I was younger, I loved the technique. I would always ask questions. Maybe in the back of my head. I knew that I was going to coach, so I would ask him questions. The technique, the detail to, let's just say, a crotch lift, right? It's so small. So when he taught us a crotch lift, everyone knows a crotch lift, right? I just think the Soviet system, they and I could be wrong, but I don't know. They teach everybody how to properly do things. It's a profession. And here in the U.S., you have your sign a waiver, and we're not responsible for giving it to you, right? So they make sure that your coaches know everything. So when it's simple as a crotch lift, most crotch lifts are being thrown over the head this way, where Sergey takes you over the head. That right there changes everything. And I think with every single one of his techniques, that's how it is. Those little small details, fireman's carries, over, under. And I think for us, me and Henry, because we were so young, with Sergey, I think we can develop his technique because when you're younger, you're kind of fearless, right? You go, if he goes, like Sergey would be like in the middle of the match, we come in, maybe fireman's carry, maybe arm throw, maybe step over. And those are high throwing moves that we don't do in this country, maybe because of the folk style rules. To him, it's, maybe fireman's carry, like it's that easy, right? So we pick things up. And I think the rest of the guys there, they're a lot older. We have Bill Zadig, you had a bunch of older guys that he's going to teach us to fireman's carry. Well, good luck trying to learn that on Bill Zadig.
Right.
So the impact he's had with me when we got there was technique. Plus, I think his, like crotch lifts or step over throws. We do a lot of that at Valiant, and I discuss this with other people. When people will say, "Well, Sergey's techniques don't work; they're too high level." it's hard to teach that to somebody that's gone through middle school, high school, college, senior level, and teach them to do a fireman's carry, get to your feet and down. Right. Like, how am I going to do that on Bill Zadig or Jerry Frey or Eric Larkin? But if you learn those at a very, very young age, meaning developmental, 5th, 6th grade and up, that comes easy. And I think that's what we're behind as a country. That's just my opinion. But Sergey's technique is what I implement now, and Terry Brands followed up a year later, and that completely changed everything.
Yeah, that's such an interesting perspective on, you know, Sergey being the national coach, and yeah, like he's gonna go through like his high throwing moves, and like Bill Zadik's not gonna pick that up at that time in his career. It's just not gonna happen, you know. So you could see where that could be a conflict, but man, at the same time, it's like you've got one of the best ever, and he's learned from the same coach his whole life how to do it properly. And so he was a big details guy on technique.
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, even to the point where, like a chest lock, his famous chest wrap or chest lock, where you lock, get your lock to one side, pull, straw your hip, push. Just that itself takes a long time to do, but there's a certain way of teaching it. Well, to most people, that's high level, but to them, that's just a fundamental basic move, I think. You can ask him more on that.
Well, it's interesting. Like if you sit and watch people drill, it was at a tournament and he was watching people drill and he's just like pointing out how sloppy everything is. The drilling's sloppy. Everything's very loose. And he's just like, he's just almost disgusted with it because he's such a perfectionist. And these guys are like legit NCAA All-American guys, but that's just how he is. He has such a high standard for technique.
Oh no, for sure. And that's the biggest thing is like, you got to teach a kid how to wrestle. Like, for example, for us, Valiant, I have kids in 6th grade, and I got to make sure they do everything properly. And what I teach is, like, it may not work for you now, but I'm going to make sure that when you shoot, your posture's up, your head's up, your hands are locked properly, your trail leg. And we focus a lot on that because as they get older, they'll understand it, And like Sergey, his technique was just out of this world. His top, he can lock his hands.
His gut.
I seen him turn. Oh man, my ribs still hurt. And he never wrestled you on his feet. He goes, part tear. And he always be the one on top. Oh, I remember, first time wrestling live, like right here, he gets his lock on the same spot every time, just raw. You shower, you're bleeding from it, just raw. And that's the thing, is like, when you talk about everything being loose, like, his lock was right here and it didn't move anywhere else. It's not going to be here. It's right here every time. And that's where, his step over, the way he turns his toe, drives posture up, you stay high. This is what we're doing at Valiant. And I think, it's starting to show a little bit more, but I think it was his influence as a technician. Now, if you want to talk about a coach, Brands, when Brands came in, everything that I do is Sergey, Terry Brands, Kevin Jackson.
Let's get into the Terry stuff. What was the biggest impacts on Terry? From Terry?
Being on time. Right? That was the first thing we had was, you hear the rumors, right? You hear the rumors, oh, he's so tough, he's mean. And I remember hearing a story when I was in Arizona. It was like, oh, he was going to fight Larkin. He doesn't like Arizona guys, and then you hear those stories, a year later, I'm like, now he's going to be my coach. So I had that, oh, he's tough. He doesn't like Arizona guys. Man, he, to me personally, is the best coach in the country. His commitment to his athletes, his detail work. See, people think he's a brawler and mean and tough, and he's just going to beat you with conditioning. As a coach, we had to do hips underneath, like so much posture. Everything that I do, like when it comes to like keeping your posture, was all Brands. He's one of the most technical coaches out there.
Really?
Yes, that's my opinion. Because I don't believe in technique is being, maybe that's just the Brands in me, I guess. Being quick and fast, and it was more like getting to a leg, staying in good posture, and doing everything correct. So if you watch him drill, Nothing's loose. Everything's tight. Head is always up. That's technique to me. Maybe I guess depends on how you do it. But one of the biggest things is, you know, when you first come to practice, Brands was our coach. Now, Sergey he had just moved to Arizona. So when me and Henry came in 2004, a year later, Sergey moved to Arizona. Terry becomes the next resident coach. And I remember, you know, when you first walk into practice, you're putting your shoes on, it's already practice was at 2:45. You still got guys putting the shoes on, lacing and putting the shirt on, they walk in. And he didn't say nothing for the first 2 days, and then he addressed everybody. I was like, you're here 15 to 20 minutes with your shoes on, sitting down, waiting, ready to go. Because if you show up at 2:45, walking in, that's no good. Your mind wasn't ready to train. And the other thing was, like, when you're in that room, because, you know, we loved MMA, and if there was a fight or boxing, we were big in boxing, you only talk wrestling.
Wow.
That's what we talk about. So, but it was something that, like, I try to, like, so I would say I model my coaching of Terry and Sergey's technique, and Brant's commitment to wrestling. And he's when you're his guy, you're his guy. If you're not on board, if you're there every day, he's with you. If you leave, guess what? This is my guy now. And that's what makes him a great coach. So
he always holds, like, he never, like, moves the line. Like, even, like, I slept in this morning 30 minutes. Like, I don't think Terry Brands has ever moved the line once in his life. Like, did you see that as a coach in terms of his, like, discipline and just daily commitment?
Oh, for sure. So one of the things that I remember, there was a wrestler named Michael Martinez. Actually, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. I think I don't know if it was a Hall of Fame, but I know he was there when Henry received his award. But Michael Martinez followed Terry to Chattanooga, came back, right? So I know when something's on the schedule, and the incline is a famous mountain and famous run in Colorado Springs. I remember it was scheduled, and Terry had to go back to Tennessee to pick up some stuff. So he said, hey, this is on the schedule, and we're supposed to run it. Well, it's pouring rain. I mean, it's falling. We all meet in front of the OTC, and one of our wrestlers, he kind of took the lead, right? And he said, "Hey, man, we're gonna cancel." I remember Michael Martinez looking like, he's like, "We need to go up." And we're like, "No, it's too dangerous." He goes, "You guys can stay. I'm going up." So even with it pouring down, Michael got in his truck, drove himself, went all the way up and down. See, this is when he first showed up. So we don't know yet, like, what is, as a coach, what kind of person is. You knew after that, if it's on the schedule, you're going up. and there was no excuses. And I remember him seeing us on Monday, and he has his little walk, pulling his shorts up, right? And he's just like, he goes, "We are mailmen. Sun, rain, snow, we always work." And I'm like, whoa. And that's when you kind of knew your standards. He set the standard so high that you had to do but follow.
That's when, like, you guys really became, like, professionals in the sense, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. Perfect. That's it. Yeah. That's when that's when you become professionals. Like I said, I mean, and you were trained that way. After a while, you knew that was the mindset. I mean, it would be snow, blizzards. It was on the schedule. We are going up the incline. I mean, we just got to suit. And then you don't know very much. I mean, I come from the desert, right? Cactuses and 115 degrees out at night. It doesn't cool under 105. Like, it's hot in the summertime. You don't know very much, you know. And once you get there, it's raining, it's snowing. We have to go up the incline. So I put on 3 sweaters, a jacket, sweats. I'm going up, and couple ways up, it got hot. You have to take it all off, right?
Right.
Then I learned sweater, sweats, go up, you get hot. So, and that's what, you know, if it's like we're going up. I do remember one time, I mean, we had one really bad blizzard, and Terry, and they called Terry because they knew Terry. We're going out. The USA wrestler called Terry, said they cannot go up. It's too dangerous. So that morning we show up to the training center, and he's like, they didn't let us go up. They're not going to stop us. So he made it. We went into the room. I wish we would have went up the incline.
Oof.
The workout he put us
How
through.
bad? How bad?
Oh man, it was Bulgarian bags, squat jumps. I mean, I remember for a couple of days we were so sore, and we were trying to drill. We're like, oh, we're just so sore. So then he didn't say nothing. The very next day, he did the same workout that we got put through, and he said, I wanted to see if it was all you guys are talking about. So he came in the next morning, did the same workout, and coached us that same afternoon or that morning. And he was like, I did it. And I'm like, wow, this is a leader here.
Wow, yeah. Dude, lead by example at the ultimate. Oh my God. Yeah. It's interesting though, because I've heard you talk now about your philosophy, and like, for example, you think that like that whole philosophy of like kind of grinding is maybe not the best way. And like, for example, like when Henry was training for Mighty Mouse 2, you thought he was under training, but he was really using the science. And I've heard you say Kale seems to be a master and not overtraining. So do you think you guys were overtraining, or is there a give and take?
Not at all. I mean, it was on the schedule because I think, so here's the thing. Me and Henry were young, right? So we skipped the college level, but I think a lot of these other guys like Bill Zadek and Mohamed Lawal, we had Jared Freyer, Sean Bunch, they had already went through the college grind, right? So I don't think it was the college grind that we went through. To me, it was tough because not of the intensity. It was more the partner that you had. I mean, I've gone through harder practices at our school, because that was the mindset, right? Your coach grew up in the 80s. Who was the most dominant coach in the 80s? Dan Gable. So that mindset, like I went through that. And in the summertime, I think it was more the training partner. So if I wanted to wrestle, I would have to go with Bill Zach. He was mainly my main training partner. And a lot of, I got really good because of Bill. If you wanted an easy day, this may sound crazy, I was going to grab my brother.
Lordy.
Lord. If not, I would have to grab Jared Freyer. I mean, it was like
as a high school, or just like basically just out of high school. Crazy.
Yeah, right out of high school.
So, and the craziest part about all this is that as you're going through it at the age you should, your brother's going through it as a really young guy, and he's just getting like forged in the fire. So like, were you at Fargo some of those years where Henry went out there and like teched Mike Gray and pinned Franklin Gomez, and like just people were slack-jawed at what was happening? They couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I think, let me see, that was his junior year. So I think he did not go to Fargo, but he was making the junior world teams.
Okay, maybe that
and
was
had
it.
Won the Open in high school. I think that, Henry won the Open in high school his senior year. I think it was just the level of commitment. Like Henry and Terry had this fun. Even so, if we had 2 practices a day, right, it was on schedule, 8 o'clock and 2:45. Before Henry went to school, Brands was with him in the morning, working with him. Now, I don't say every day, but I know that was a big thing. And to have that high-level coaching at a very young age, you saw the results. With Henry, and I think with Kyle Snyder, they get high-level coaching at a younger age. And I think they're unique. I mean, they are special what they do, and I think it was through all their hard work growing up, right? But, yeah, I mean, Terry was, I could say, he's the best coach in the country.
Wow, that's awesome. And I've heard you say that, like in terms of training, Henry would turn over every stone, and that you've had in your earlier years some regret that you didn't do that. And that now as a coach, you're putting all your effort into coaching and turning over every stone. I love the part of your career though, after you joined WCAP and we're done with the Army, you are basically kind of like looking for something to do in Colorado, and you become a demolition worker, right? Working on a demo crew, and had to move back to Arizona and restart. Could you just kind of talk through that period of your life and how you got over some of like the guilt from not wrestling to what you thought you could into where you're at now as a coach?
Oh yeah, definitely. So like I said, I always knew I wanted to be a coach. I loved it. I mean, when I was younger, even in high school, me and Henry would be, we train, and then you have the little kids that look up to you, and they would ask me a question after practice. Hey, how do you do this? And I would show them the duck, and they would ask Henry, and Henry was like, don't bug me right now. I'm not done. So that was like, Henry's mindset was just different, where I'm like, oh yeah, I would take my time. And Henry would now work with you until he was done. Like, so he's always had that mindset. And I think for me, when, watching Henry, and even myself, sometimes, and this happens to a lot, and this is what I want to try to prevent my wrestlers to go through the same is, you want to live up to everybody's expectations, and you train and you say you truly want to be an Olympic champ, but your actions aren't showing it, right? Or you're not doing the right things. You're not eating the right foods. You're not getting the right rest. And I could say that I was that wrestler. Now, when I was in the wrestling room, I worked my butt off, and I worked hard. And if you ask anybody, I was probably the most technical guy one of the most technical guys in that room, drilling wise and learning, because I love technique. There was something about learning wrestling moves and why things work. But I would watch Henry, he'd build a routine, he would do his push-ups, his sit-ups, and even you would watch him do his little yoga poses and do a bunch of stuff like that. I would be done, go to sauna, go to the cafeteria, come back out, and Henry's still going at it. And I think that was like, he made a goal and he wanted to finish it. Where I didn't know what I wanted in my life, but I was just sticking around because I didn't want to, and I call this like the real world, right? We want to stay in the wrestling world because we don't want to face the real world, which is get a job, just go back and start paying bills. And people, when you're done wrestling, it's hard because this is all you've done. Since I was 11 years old till I was about 25, but I knew I was done wrestling. I didn't have that drive. And if you're not going to be in it 100%, you're always going to fall short. I don't care. Like, Henry can start training now. This is how good he is, and do very well at the Open. But if it's not his priority, you're always going to fall short. Watching Henry go through, the Olympic Games, I mean, what he did, I mean, the guy was basically imprisoned himself. He was in his room, training in the morning, back in his room, training again. And I wasn't willing to go through that. So I knew it was time for me to stop.
He was that obsessive about it, though, when he was in that peak?
Even to this point, like, I with this fighting, with this, even when he comes into my room, if he sees a kid not focused like what he thinks, it's like, he doesn't want to win. Why is he even in here? This is privilege. And I'm like, calm down. I don't know how you can do this. He starts flipping out. I'm like, hey, he's going to get it. I would rather see him in my room and watch him, see everybody else around him win, and it's contagious, right? As long as I have enough people in my wrestling room driven, the rest will follow. Now, if it was the opposite, then yeah, I would have to start booting people out because I don't want that. So I think I put wrestling on a pedestal, and like I told you earlier, I had a hard time in school. You're not growing up with the father, your mother's working 2 jobs. And what is a couple of things that, you learn from, I think the father is the pillar of a household, right? There's statistics out there that can say that. And I didn't know that now that that at my age was, you learn how to change a tire, change oil, be a man, get up, do yard work. I never had anybody tell me that. All I had to do was stay out of trouble and wrestle, because my brother didn't also have a father. So I don't believe a mother can raise a man. Only a man can raise a man. So a lot of those flaws that I had now as an adult, it stayed with me for a while, for up until a couple of years ago. When I stopped wrestling, I had nowhere to. I had no skill. I had no trade. I didn't know how to carpentry, ironwork. I had plumbing skills. My life was wrestling. So I think when I got done, I didn't know what to do. And I think even a janitorial job was offered to me, and I'm like, I'm too good for it. And I would not take it. Eventually, a buddy of mine, he said, hey, you're looking for work? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, it's demo. So demolition sounds tough and manly. I'll do it. Started working my way up the company. And you have that work ethic as a wrestler. I moved up the company really fast. So, but here's what you're doing now. You went from being at the Olympic Games in China, going to Lithuania, France, to sweeping up floors and picking up drywall and insulation is some of the worst stuff. You can breathe it in and it's all over you. You're itchy all day. So when I had to do that, I've always thought, I know I'm better than this. And I could thank one of the workers, his name was John Iwasaki. He would always see me and go, Cejudo, what are you doing here, man? Get the heck out of here. Stop doing this job. Because you're going to be 50 years old and you're going to still be doing this. He would tell me this almost every morning. Because I don't want to see you here in a year from now. A year came by, I was still there. Yeah. And it was like, he was licking my arms. I could barely hit. But when that happened, I was like, I knew I was better than that. Well, I don't say I'm better because that's honest living. But I go from being with Sergey, Terry, all these great men, all these great people, Kevin Jackson. I mean, I got to travel the world. In demolition, no skills are required. So most of the people that I worked with were ex-convicts. So, well, the cool about it, you got to hear a lot of stories, but I'm like, wow, ex-convicts. One of the guys that I was with did 5 years for attempted murder. One did 15 for attempted murder. The other one was in there for drugs. And you start hearing all these stories, and I'm like, I can't do this. But you got to do what you have to do to make a living. And I think that was the whole point of why I'm so passionate. I don't want to say passionate, I'm so driven to, when I as a coach, is really not to put wrestling on a pedestal, but to get these kids going to college. And that will never, even if you go to college, you'll never, it won't define you, but just giving them a better opportunity. I think that's what really drives me. And I think a lot of it is regret. I have so much regret in my heart that it took me so long to get rid of it. And I think I was looking for something different, which was, I told myself, I'm going to be the best coach. If being the best wrestler wasn't the path for me, I think, maybe my path was coaching this whole time. And that's why I put so much effort into what I did.
How did you finally get past that? And I mean, no one's ever passed it, but how did you move from kind of letting it define you to moving a little bit past the guilt?
Yeah, I think maybe finding a different goal, and which was, I remember reading a book. I can't remember exactly what it was.
Game of Life.
What's that?
Game of Life.
Yeah. And I remember the way I was able to kind of get rid of it in my head, because I'm telling you, it's regret. It's not a good thing, there was times that I wouldn't want to go back to Arizona because I was ashamed that I didn't live up to everyone's expectations. There was a lot of times, hey, we're going to go to, I don't want to, I ended up staying back for certain events. I don't think I could face the people around me.
Really?
Yeah, it was.
And that's years. So that's like years after, 2012 on, you just couldn't even go back. You were just.
Yeah, it was a little, even throughout the years that I did wrestle and compete, because I knew I wasn't doing the right things. So I know my first year in Colorado, I'd go back, and then little by little, I stopped going back home. So I just don't want any one of my wrestlers to ever live that, the feeling of regret. And I think for me, it was what got me, I don't know if I read a book or it was a message or going to church. I can't remember which one it was. And it was to the sense where I remember thinking, God's plans are a little different for everybody. And maybe my calling was to be a coach. And I think that was the only way that I was able to let it go. because I know a lot of people now, and I know this for a fact, when people get done wrestling, they don't know what to do with their lives.
Fact, man.
Yeah. I just about everybody. Because
you never
well,
and what I couldn't think of it earlier, but another interview you had said the book that you read was called The Game of Life.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I was like, couldn't wait for you to tell that story. Cause I was like, man, that is deep. And like for you to come to that and then finally move back home to Arizona is just a cool way to like, it's like this journey's complete now, right? You've learned your lessons and now you're giving back to the community.
Yeah, for sure. It was the game of life. And I think in that book, it was a story. I think there was a girl that wanted a certain man. Like she wanted to marry, let's just say Joe. And it was like everything that she wanted was him. It's not like she wanted anybody else. She wanted this guy. And I think later, I think God showed her, like, look, maybe this isn't the right man, but God will put the right man in front of you. I think for me, it's like, that's the way I was able to get rid of it. I'm like, maybe wrestling wasn't my path. Maybe God had a better and bigger goal and bigger plans for me. And that's when I was able to let it go and move on. And it took me, even now, I struggle with a lot of it. A lot. You're never done. It's never, there's always a what if, but I've done a better job of letting that whole part of my life go. And it's not like I did a lot of, I wasn't a drug addict or an alcoholic. It was the fact that I didn't accomplish my goals or what I set out. And maybe it was everybody else's expectation. Maybe they weren't mine.
Did seeing Henry do it make it easier or harder for you?
Seeing Henry do it? No, yeah, it was, I mean, like with Henry's success, I mean, that's kind of, I live almost through that. And maybe a little bit of me has the fact that a little bit in me is just like, to stay on top is really, really the toughest thing to do, right? And I think I knew when Henry started surpassing my credentials, I was kind of like, here's the torch, pass it on, you be the guy, you carry the weight now. And I don't think I could have carried the weight like he did. So I did live through him. I love the fact that it was no longer on me anymore.
Yeah.
Growing up, I was the one, I was the guy. And I think when he started to surpass it for credentials, I'm like, here's the torch, you take it and run with it. I don't want it anymore. I think that was maybe the wrong mindset. Maybe I wish I could have did things different, but there's another path for me.
Definitely. And I could tell you and I could talk for about 3 hours, but I have to jump in 10, but I got a couple rapid fire questions I got to get your thoughts on, my friend.
Yes.
All right, perfect. First one is, I've heard you say in the past, your goal as a coach is to save kids from their parents. I don't know if I don't know if that's true or not, but if the general message is true, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so when wrestling's tough already, I don't care where you come from, whether you come from a place where I came from or you come from a well-off family. If you're in the wrestling room, you're tough. Like you are tough. What happens is most parents want to live through their kids. And when you put that burden on them, you get the results that you get from me. And my mom wasn't, that much in my life about it, but maybe everyone else's expectations of winning. You got to make sure that it's their goals. And my goal is to protect them from their pain. Not in a bad way. It's just like, hey, when you come to me, let me handle it. You be a parent and supportive and let me handle their skills. I feel like I don't have college education, but I do have a degree in the sports science of wrestling. I mean, if you look at my background with the coaches that I've been under, I know what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I feel like I know what I'm doing. I don't have all the answers because we're always failing and getting better, but if I can protect them and keep them in my room and let them grow, see, most parents want them to win now. I wanted things to come organically. So a 10-year-old should not be doing the same workload as my 17-year-old or my juniors. A 10-year-old should be working on reaction drills, not lifting weights. I mean, according to their bodies, they're still growing, their joints are still being developed. You start to put weight on them. does them no good. But if we do reaction drills, tumbling, makes them a better wrestler. So keep them, protect them from their parents in the way that teach the parents how to be supportive, and let the professionals do their work.
Perfect. And I also heard that you were big on holding your kids out of wrestling until like 11, 12. Would you do the same thing again now that you've had them go through that, or would you start them earlier?
No, I think like my son just started. He's 12 years old. I first started. He had long hair. If you look at him, he used to have long hair, and he would come in the room. But here's the other thing. The advantage that I had with my kid, I'm not big into video games. He was always in the wrestling room, jumping, doing cartwheels, doing flips out on his own. So I was able to hold him back up until this year. And I think for me, because I'm not we're not competitive for him to win. I wanted him to learn how to lose and take losses and not make it such a big deal about losing, because that's part of life, right? With him, I started him a year ago, and he didn't even wrestle in the state tournament. I had him in a few competitions. And what I tell parents, I wouldn't then do the same thing, or my son didn't compete very much because I don't believe in him competing so much. Why? If I want him to win, I would have to teach him a power half, legs in. You know what it does to a kid's joints at that age? Their joints are being developed. Why would I teach a power half, make this shoulder come to this side at age 6 years old?
Right.
I want him to grow. So to answer your question, there's a little bit of me that would have loved to see him just throw him out there on the mat for those memories of just to see him wrestle in a small singlet. Maybe just throw him out there just to have fun with it and laugh about it. But maybe to just that. I wouldn't start him off any other way.
Well, it's cool because now at Valiant, you have, instead of having like high school rigidly defined, you guys have like an open canvas for what you can do with high school. And you can kind of treat those years as the years of fun and developing, like you would, most people do it in middle school. And like, that's like parents' best memories is traveling with their kids in middle school. And then high school gets a little more serious. Then college, most kids stop. But you'll have like the high school years as those years if things continue. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, like I said, I used to come to the Arizona State camps. Eric Larkin was the Hodge winner, was the man, unbelievable. What have you learned from working with him over the past couple of years?
Oh, just wrestling wise, I mean, he runs our top bottom when it comes to wrestling, I was a freestyler, right? So I wrestled at the highest level in folk style in high school in Arizona. We're not very strong in Arizona, but there was another level of folk style wrestling. I used to say I hated folk style. Oh, folk style sucks. Folk style sucks. But I think it was being ignorant, not knowing. Instead of learning it, you just say, oh, it's not good. Freestyle's the best. Man, with being around him, I have a whole nother love for the sport of folk style. Now I'm obsessed with learning. So
really, you've learned that much just from the top bottom game with him.
Yeah, top bottom on everything. This guy was amazing. One thing I do is how much he loves like what he does. Like he loves wrestling so much that he started school. His passion for wrestling. And me, I used to be really like Larkin. Sometimes he has to bounce me off because I used to want to help the world. Like, oh, I want to help the world. Now I'm like, if you're not on board with what we're doing, I don't need you around. And he kind of balanced me off where, no, we got to help everybody. And I think that about him, that his heart that he has for what he does. I mean, I could give an example of last week, but that maybe I'll let it out another time. But he puts other people ahead of him, and even sometimes his family.
Wow. And I'd be remiss without giving a shout out to the Douglas brothers, Harvey Twister legends down there with you guys as well. And it's just cool to see you guys all come together at Valiant Prep. I got to get down there and spend some time with you guys and shoot a little film or a little story on it. 'Cause it's just amazing that it's all kind of come together and all these different worlds are melding. It's awesome.
Oh, definitely. I mean, Mike, without Mike and Eric and Mr. Pollock, their vision for the school was, you know, it was hard to kind of, I don't want to say get on board. But when they told me this is what they wanted to do, I was thinking, we could do it differently. We could just join clubs. And Eric and Mike, and they're like, no, this is going to be different. And most people, me and you talking about this right now, you won't understand until you come and you see what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I believe in order for us to come close to competing against the best country in the world in wrestling, which is Russia, we need to multiply this, what we're doing at Valiant, 100 times. That's the only way we're going to ever come close. And maybe we'll never catch them. Maybe we might sneak in and beat them at the Worlds one year, which we've done in the past. But to be consistently fight and battle year after year, we need Valiants all over the country. Yeah. I was just talking about with somebody about the age group of our senior guys. Burroughs is up in his 30s. Dake's up in his close to, I think he's in his 30s.
Taylor's getting up there.
We're old. Once these guys leave, can we still compete with Russia? I don't know.
I don't either. I know. I was just telling someone that I go, man, after 2024, we're going to see a total revolution of the team.
Yes. And I think what's his name? James Green just got the new job at USC Wrestling as development coach. I would love to work with James Green. And I mean, I've been coaching for a while, but I think he's in a unique position to change this country and the way we do things. And I think we're the model for it now. But it's not going to put it this way without offending anybody. But when they started the Live Your Dream, you know, $250,000 for Olympic gold medal as an incentive, that was an awesome thing. And I never understood it. And I remember Terry saying, we're like, oh, 250,000. Oh my God, that's going to wake us up even earlier. His whole mindset was like, so you're telling me that if somebody gave you more money, you're going to work harder? You should already want to work harder and win, you know? And I think we're in a, the rest of the world is doing, and multiply it so that we can truly compete, because it comes down to the grassroots level, development from bottom to top.
No question, man. And like, if you look at that, again, going back to the Russian system, a lot of those dudes will have the same coach all the way through, and they're not transitioning over, learning new styles. So I got to run, man. I'm so sorry to cut you off, but it's been a pleasure, Angel Cejudo. Thank you so much for coming on, my friend.
Man, thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Take care.
Have a good one.